Hi there, it's Mr. Clark. Welcome to lesson Clef.2.1 on the tenor clef. So we talked last time about how the C clef has two common positions in the modern era. The alto clef is centered on the third line, whereas when it's centered on the fourth line, we call it the tenor clef. So you have the note C, then E, G, B, and D as your spaces, and D, F, A, C, E as your lines. There's no instrument that uses tenor clef as its main clef, but a bunch of bass clef instruments like bassoon, trombone, euphonium, cello, sometimes tuba, sometimes double bass, use it when the notes go higher. Because if you're in bass clef, then that's C, and this brings it down to here. Middle C specifically brings it down to the fourth line, brings it down to fifth, so that gives you higher notes with fewer ledger lines, which is really the point of clefs, to make music easier to read. Music is easier to read when there aren't ledger lines. Um, you might be like, well, why don't they just use treble clef? And at this point, it's basically historical convention, what people are used to reading. As a clarinetist, there are sometimes three, sometimes four ledger lines below the treble clef. And I much prefer reading notes with four ledger lines to using bass clef for clarinet. Terrible thing. Never do it. Wagner has some like bass clef parts that transpose in B flat and A. Terrible. Never do it. Um, and so it's just what people are used to, and as a composer, you should do what's easiest for people to read. Um, so if they say they prefer tenor clef, and I've talked to a bunch of bassoonists who are like, yes, please, tenor clef, no treble clef, use tenor clef. The arrangement of flats is the same. The arrangement of sharps alternates, kind of the opposite of flats, alternating upwards. Not something that I would bother memorizing necessarily. I would have to think about the order of sharps and tenor clef, but just good information to have on hand. See you next time.